Okay, well here we are at 7.3b. So this is chapter 7, section 7.3. We're talking about rational expressions and least common denominator, and we're in the B video because the A video was talking about talked about the least common denominator here, and just how to find it. Just a review, I suppose. If we're going to find the least common denominator, we're going to find that we have to list our least common denominator by number one, finding factor the denominator. And number two, we had to list our lowest common denominator, includes every single factor from every single denominator to the highest power, raising it to the highest power. Highest power. That's pretty much video A. So there's video A. And now we're kind of now to video B. We're going to find more stuff. We're going to find the lowest common denominator, which we did up here, and we're going to rewrite those expressions. We're going to rewrite expressions that are given to us in terms of our lowest common denominator. So let's fast forward. Let's kind of review. This here is a review of video A. Factor our denominator. Find our lowest common denominator, includes every single factor from every single denominator raised to the highest power. And 7.3b is in red here. We're going to find the lowest common denominator, rewrite our expressions. So this is all the stuff that we went through for video A. And now we're going to go to video B, and we're going to go to the next part of my slides. And this is, in fact, all of my printout from D2L is all the slides that we're going through. So what are we going to do? We're going to, now that we know how to determine the lowest common denominator, which we did in the previous video, 7.3a, now we can use those ideas to rewrite expressions that are given to us, including numbers, including polynomials, using the idea of the lowest common denominator. And then finally we can be able to add and subtract them, because the next section, 7.4, is adding and subtracting polynomials. So here, now that we're, if we're asked to rewrite expressions, these are the steps that we have to take. Step number one is identify the lowest common denominator. What were those steps? Oh yeah, step number one, A, was factor, and this is all the stuff from our previous video. Factor our denominator. Step 1b would be to list everything in the lowest common denominator, includes every factor from every denominator, and these are all steps that we listed in 7.3a, the previous video, to the highest power. So step one here to rewrite expressions is identify the lowest common denominator. What are those steps? Factor our denominator, find our lowest common denominator, includes every single factor from every denominator raised to the highest power. Step two is probably the most important for rewriting expressions, is multiply the numerator and denominator of each fraction that we're given by the factors from the LCD that are missing from those denominators, from the given denominators. So we've got to multiply the numerator and denominator by what's missing in the denominator. So let's take a look at an example maybe. If we take a look at an example of, let's say 1/2 and 1/3 and 1/6, we're going to say, all right, well, let's step number one was identify the lowest common denominator, because we're going to have to rewrite these expressions using our lowest common denominator. How do we do that? Well, rewrite the expression. I don't know what happened there. All right. We have to rewrite our expressions. We have to find our lowest common denominator. And in order to find our lowest common denominator, we factor. There's 2 to the first power. There's 3. And there's 2 times 3. So we've factored our lowest common denominator. Now we list our parts of our lowest common denominator. It includes every single factor from every single denominator raised to the highest power. This has a 2, we list a 2. Well, this has a, oops, sorry, that one has a 3. that factored is 3. That has to have, the lowest common denominator has to have a 3. The lowest common denominator for this one has to have a 2 and a 3, and now it's raised to the highest power that we see it. It has to be to the first power, to the first power, to the first power, and there's our lowest common denominator is to the 6th power. Now this is kind of a simplistic way to look at it, but it shows you what we have to do for all these steps. So we found our lowest common denominator by factoring every denominator and listing all of our factors and then raising them to the highest power. So there's our lowest common denominator. So now our lowest common denominator is 6. So let's make that a 6. So there's our target. We're going to convert every fraction here to sixths. All right, so I got 1/2, I'm going to convert to sixths. 1/3, I'm going to convert to sixths. 1/6, I'm going to convert to sixths. And this again is probably pretty basic, pretty straightforward, but it gives us an idea about what we have to do for more complicated things. So if we've got our lowest common denominator as 6, we've got to multiply. Well, let's go back to our steps, I guess. Identify the lowest common denominator. We did. Multiply the numerator and denominator of each fraction by the factors from the lowest common denominator that are missing from the original denominators. So multiply numerator and denominator by what's missing. Multiply numerator and denominator by what's missing. Those are probably the important words there. So what's missing in my denominator here? I've got a 2, but there's a 3 over here in my lowest common denominator, so I've got to multiply by 3. And we've got to multiply the numerator and denominator by what's missing. Remember, here's our numerator, here's our denominator. So I'm multiplying my denominator because I get 2 times 3 gives me 6, and that's what my target denominator should be. But I've also got to multiply my numerator because I have to keep my original fraction the same. I got to keep 1/2. So if I multiply by 3 over 3, I'm multiplying by 1. So 2 times 3 gives me 6, and that's what I want. And now I've got to multiply 1 times 3 as well to give me 3. And if we were given 3/6, how would we reduce that? 3 divided by 3 is 1, 6 divided by 3 is 2, and we'd have our original fraction value of 1/2. All right, so that said, we've got to do the same thing for 1/3. We've got to convert it to sixths. How do we do it? We've got to multiply numerator and denominator by what's missing in the denominator. 3 times 2 is, the 2 is missing in my denominator to get me to sixths, because here's my lowest common denominator, has a 2 and a 3. This only has a 3 right now, so I've got to multiply by 2. And I've got to multiply my numerator and denominator by 2 over 2, by 2 essentially. Each one has to be multiplied by 2. So we're multiplying by 2 over 2, but essentially we're multiplying by 1. Why do we do that? 3 times 2 gives me 6, and that's what my target's going to be. That's the whole goal of this, is to convert to a lowest common denominator. All these fractions convert to a lowest common denominator. So if I multiply 1 by 2, I get 2. 3 times 2 gives me sixths, and that's what I want. All right, last one, 1 times 6. Well, what's missing in my 6? Well, there's nothing missing because I got 2 times 3. I've already got 2 and 3 here, so I really just multiply by nothing, or I don't have to multiply by anything, but if we're going to follow all of our rules, we multiply by 1 times 1. 1 times 1 is 1. 6 times 1 is 6, and here are our fractions converted into our lowest common denominator. So we started with identify our lowest common denominator. We did. We factored. We listed everything in the lowest common denominator raised to the highest power, and that gave us 6. So our target became sixths. And then we had to go back to our steps and say we've got to multiply the numerator and denominator by what's missing in the denominator. 2 is missing a 3, so we've got to multiply by 3, not just in the denominator, but in the numerator, because we multiply by 1 then. Multiplying by 3 over 3 is 1. 1 times 3 gives me 3. 2 times 3 gives me 6. Same thing over here. What's missing in thirds? 2. We've got to multiply by 2 over 2. So 3 times 2 gives me 6. 1 times 2 gives me 2. Over here, there's really nothing missing. We don't even have to put that 1 over 1, because 1/6 is 1/6, and now all of our original fractions are equivalent fractions now in terms of our lowest common denominator of sixths. So I'm going to leave this video as it is and just kind of move on to the next video, and this is going to be our video for today, and that's going to be 7.2a. how to convert a number into lowest common denominator.